This is the using STAR growth data to monitor progress and inform instruction professional development session. Thank you for joining us. We're adding the deck in the chat. You can access it using the QR code here or the bit.ly at use STAR growth data. Thank you again for joining. Please add any questions in the chat, or you can just unmute and ask your question. I'll keep us moving along here. Here's our norms for learning. We just want to be present. I know it might be hard to focus at this time of year, but we will all do our best to do that. And as you may well know, we are administering the STAR assessments during this spring session, especially to monitor progress toward our district-wide third grade goal of literacy. And we have some interim goals in grades K and 1 to help us to monitor progress. And we'll be looking at our grade K1-2 data especially this year. Outcomes for this session include learning about new ways to measure growth using SGP, student growth percentiles, finding out how students' growth is low, typical, or high, the rates of growth, and analyzing growth versus achievement data simultaneously to make instructional decisions and to reflect on instructional practice. Just a quick reminder, we are in the spring window, April 2nd to May 17th. Anyone who is assessing K1-2 students, STAR Early Literacy for grade K, STAR Reading and STAR Math for grades 1 and 2, grade 3 and 8 can optionally assess, and the data will be included in the DNA reports and shared with BOI reports to the receiving teacher next year if students are assessed by the due date of May 17th. So, how is growth measured with STAR assessments? Gone are the days where we just do a pre and post and subtract. Now we're going to have a much deeper and more meaningful measure that we can use with the STAR assessments. And we'll learn about that shortly. We can also look at growth relative to achievement and see how students are moving along and progressing toward along their learning progression. So, what is the difference between growth and achievement? Achievement can be measured by a scaled score or a percentile rank to a degree, because the percentile ranks are aligned to scaled scores and benchmarks. They represent achievement at a point in time. The scaled scores and percentile ranks provide a benchmark of student scores relative to a target. A percentile rank is a comparison to peers in a norm reference group. So it's not necessarily a criterion referenced, but we have it set up in our system to provide a benchmark which is showing proficiency and a criteria for each student's grade level achievement. But how we look at growth is slightly different. It's not just about how students are doing relative to a proficiency target at a given point in time. It's about how students move and grow across points in time. And it is designed relative to peers who have the same academic starting point. So let's learn a little bit more about the student growth percentile. The SGP describes a student's growth relative to the growth of his or her academic peers the same age students with the similar prior history of scaled scores. The SGP can range from 1 to 99. Walk through an example. So this is Krista. She's in the 6th grade, and her most recent STAR score was a 1069. Before that, her score was a 1050. That's an increase of 19 scale score points. But how do we know if this growth is low, typical, or high? Well, let's think about how Krista's SGP is determined. She scored 1069. Before that, she scored a 1050, just like all these other students. So they had a similar starting point of 1050. We can refine this peer group by looking even further and considering test data from earlier to the subsequent windows if we'd like. For now, we'll just focus on one. So we're looking for students who are walking the same achievement pathway as Krista, meaning they scored the same as Krista in both the prior windows. And we'll remove the students who do not have the same starting points. Okay. Now we are only comparing Krista to those students who have the most similar history of achievement as hers. We'll put them all in the same bucket to compare them. When we compare, we can see that some kids made less growth and some kids made more. Krista grew as much or more than 58% of the students in the same grade with a similar score history. So this gives her an SGP of 58. Now, one thing that is important to also know is in order to find a growth score, you will have to look at students' assessment administration history, and they will have to have at least 2 scores on STAR assessments from 2 separate windows of time. And those windows are not defined by the assessment plan, though the assessment plan does somewhat capture exactly what you see here. So in the Renaissance platform, you'll be able to see SGPs for students who have scores, at least if they have one in the fall and one in the winter, or if they have one in the winter and one in the spring, and so on. They must have at least 2 scores in different time frames. And even if they have one in the fall and one in the spring, that will work. Now let's talk about acceleration. So thinking about that visual again of all the students who have similar performance and the history of performance, those who didn't match up and didn't have the similar history, those who maybe were not growing as fast, probably fell in this low growth group. Because if you recall, Krista was in this, she scored a 58 SGP. So she's in this typical growth group. She scored between 35 and 65 SGP. If students score in the 66 to 99th SGP student growth percentile, then that is an accelerated growth. That is a high growth rate relative to same age peers with the same history of achievement. So that is how you know if students are growing at a rate that is high, typical, or low. based on the SGP score. And these scores are fixed and as a default within the Renaissance platform system. And we recommend keeping those in place so that you can get a good, clear picture of which students are growing at a rate that is low, typical, or high. Any questions before we go into accessing these data and reports? Okay. Now we're going to talk about how you can find a growth report with SGPs for all your students. So this is an example. First, I'll show you how to navigate the report, and then I'll show you how to access it. This is an example of just a typical growth report. We have students, a general description of their growth rate and their achievement. So we have high growth and low proficiency, low growth and low proficiency, and so on. So you can see their growth relative to their achievement for their grade level. And many of you may have students who they're growing, but maybe they are, you're not seeing them move on toward those grade level targets. This is a great report to run to find out just how much are they growing, and to get to see that acceleration piece. And that's here's an excellent example here. You can see 94. That's a high growth rate for this student assessed in the fall and the winter. You can see the scaled score and the benchmarks and how they are moving from not yet to approaching. Their percentile rank is increasing, their normal curve equivalency increasing, instructional reading level increasing, estimated oral reading fluency also increasing. And then here you can see a summary of the change from fall to winter when the student took the STAR assessment test. So this is the change in their scaled score, the change in their percentile rank, change in their NCE, change in their instructional reading level, and change in their estimated oral reading fluency. And so on, you can see for each student here. And if you are in the report, you can actually click on, sorry, you can click on each of these columns and you can sort to find students who maybe have the highest rates of change, or you can even also look for the students who might have a high degree of negative change to see what is going on and see if you need more information about those students. Here's a student who has data from the previous year. Okay, so let me show you. You can click here to find out how to run this report and how to access it in the Renaissance platform. And let's see here, we have that right here. So teachers would log in using clever.sfusd.edu. School administrators or coaches would use the bit.ly/STAR-SFUSD. Go to reports on the landing page, view reports, click on STAR assessments, and then scroll down to find the growth and progress section and select STAR growth report. You can pin a report if you want to find it at the top when you come back in to the Renaissance platform the next time. And then from there, you can select for the assessment that you want to analyze growth data for. So in this example, we have reading, and we're selecting the assessment type of STAR reading. This is where you could pick STAR reading or STAR reading Spanish. You would select your school and the students. You can select your class, or if you've created groups, you can select students in your groups that you've created, or even individual students. You can disaggregate your class by focal groups, students who have characteristics of perhaps English learners or multilingual learners. You can look for them by choosing demographics. You do have to search by LEP in order to disaggregate by that group, or you could choose ethnicity and so on. Then you can choose the time frame. I would recommend always selecting the latest, most current SGP so as to not confuse matters with previous years and so on and so forth. And then this report should default to the 50 SGP as a sort of a standard. And then you can group by classes or students. If you're a principal, you can group by classes. And always select, I would always select the STAR Unified Scale. And if you're assessing in English in STAR Reading or STAR Math, use the state benchmark. If you're assessing STAR Early Literacy or in Spanish, use the school benchmarks. For these, I would not select show grade equivalency. That's a measure that even the vendor and the chief academic officer and many psychometricians just don't find very meaningful, and it typically just confuses matters. So we don't recommend checking the box next to show grade equivalency. It's unnecessary to show student ID, as you don't want to necessarily get personally identifiable information out there. This is for you to reflect on student data. You could show the summary only, but if you're looking at your class, I think you might want to look at every single student that you're running the class, the data for. And you can hide groups, hide students without data, and then update report. And that is how you would access the growth report, which shows students' data by the growth using the SGP, student growth percentile, and also shows some of the qualitative data as well as quantitative data around achievement, as in this example here. And you can, again, sort by the scaled scores, and you can see the summary of change from one SGP window to another. And then at the very bottom, you can also see a summary for your class from pre and post and the overall change. And use that to reflect on the year even. And think about what is working. Another way to look and see how students are growing is to use this growth proficiency chart. There's a lot to this chart, so I'm just going to go slow, but essentially, this is a dynamic scatter plot. It provides a comparison of how students are performing based on their student growth percentile and the percent proficient or scaled score of their latest test scores across the two SGP windows. The blue circles represent students whose data you're viewing. If you hover over them, you can see here as an example, you would see individual students' names with their prior SGP scaled score and their latest scaled score, the dates, and then the actual numeric value of their SGP, which is from 0 to 100. Actually, it's 0 to 99. The x-axis is showing the minimum proficiency for achievement. So if students are below the x-axis, then they have lower achievement. If they are, and that's if they're on the right or the left, if they're below, they have lower achievement. And then if they are above the x-axis, then they are scoring proficient on the assessment. But what's exciting is you can see their growth relative to their achievement. And again, this is really helpful for students who are making growth, but maybe perhaps they're just not, necessarily moving, they're not proficient yet. So let's look at this y-axis. So here's a y-axis. This is a good place to start. This is the 50 SGP, and you can see how we have the typical growth rate category from 35 to 65 highlighted here. And this student over here is scoring in a not yet proficient place. However, they're in a very high growth category in this quadrant. So they had high growth. So you're looking for who is over to the right. And then you have students over here who have high growth and they are scoring above proficient. And again, if you hover over these little circles, you'll see their names. Oops. Sorry, my mouse is very sensitive, excuse me. Okay, and then down below, you'll see a summary just like we just looked at in the STAR growth report, which shows a qualitative summary of each student, how they are doing and in their growth and achievement, and then their SGP scores, and their SGP and their prior Scout scores and their latest Scout score. And then here, if you click here, you can access the deck in the chat and you can see how to run this report, which is somewhat similar to the report we just looked at. Oh, this one. Students log in, or teachers log in using clever.sfusc.edu. School-wide administrators and coaches that use the bit.ly. Go to reports on the landing page, STAR assessments again. Go down to the growth and progress section, click growth proficiency chart, pin it if you want to have it at the top again. And then you would select your school, your class, the subject, which is reading or math, the assessment, STAR literacy, STAR reading, STAR math, and this is where you would also select for Spanish. And you select the grade and the benchmark type, which is state benchmark for STAR reading, STAR math, and the school benchmark for STAR literacy and the Spanish assessments. And then the growth expectation, I always recommend just starting with 50. Keeping everything at 50 is a good rule of thumb. Makes the chart look nice and even, and that's what's commonly used for a benchmark to start from to look at growth. If you're in the STAR Renaissance platform and you are getting a little lost, you can always click on a little question mark at the top, or and you'll find a help file that is connected to the report that you're in, and it will answer questions. And I'll show you that here in a moment. But I wanted to show you, we have a link to the help file right here. And then you can download this data, the summary data, into a PDF or into a CSV file, which can be converted to Excel. Whew, so that was a lot. Any questions or wondering so far? I know we had a few latecomers. We're putting the deck in the chat. We went over a definition of SGP earlier. Hopefully you were able to look through the deck to find that definition. Okay. Go in the Renaissance platform real quick. just to show you that help file. Real quick, how to access reports, STAR assessment. I have already pinned the report up here. And once I'm in the report, if I get confused, I can click on this little question mark and it'll take me to the help file. But you can see here, most likely it will default to the last thing you were looking at. And the only benchmark type that's available for the given measures. So for STAR reading, it's going to be the state. And for STAR literacy or for the Spanish assessments, the district. Okay. And we have another attendee joining us. We've just gone over the meat of this session, and we are just going into a conversational bit here. We have a very small group, so we were going to let everyone unmute, ask questions, but also talk about what is the difference between growth and achievement. Why do we look at both growth and achievement? And maybe what other measures might you consider when you're reflecting on these data when thinking about whether students grew or did not grow. You may think about attendance data or tutoring, or if they're receiving a multi-tiered system of support, that kind of thing. Does anyone feel comfortable and brave and wanting to unmute and share what they learned so far, especially with anyone who just joined us?
It kind of sounds to me like the difference between growth and achievement. So that like achievement is what the student can do on the assessment. And then the growth is like the difference between like what they can do at trimester 1 and versus what they can do at the end of trimester 2. Is that right?
I like the way you said that. Yeah, it's the growth is the rate of change as they move from the fall to the winter to the spring, and it's based on the students who are the same age, who have the same history of scaled scores or achievements. And so exactly, they when students take the test, they receive a scaled score or a percentile rank score, and that is aligned to a benchmark, which we all have set up in our system to show where the student is achieving at that point in time. And yes.
So if you visit our STAR Analysis to Action page, we have a number of resources linked on that web page. For example, here you see a screenshot of the Measure Growth analysis tool that's within the Teacher's Guide to Taking Action with STAR. It will guide you through some questions on reflecting on your students' achievement and growth data. In addition, we do have a short module. It's a video and a short slide deck on how you can create groups using your students' scaled scores or even their percentile ranks, so that when you do run a certain report, for example, the instructional planning class report that we've spoken about in previous PD sessions, you can use that report with the focus skills that are just for the students who had similar scale scores or similar percentile ranks, so they're only getting focus skills that pertain to their achievement. And then we also have a standards mastery report reflection tool. So if you're familiar with the standards mastery report in the Renaissance platform, you know that it lists all of your students and the standards in reading and math. that the assessment tested them on that are connected with our California state standards. So then you will see which standards you had taught for the most recent time period and reflect, which students are in the beginning level for each standard, which ones are in approaching and who have mastered. And for the standards that you have taught, you would most likely see students who are in the approaching or meeting, because those are the standards that you did teach. And hopefully by the end of this year, you've taught most of the standards within your grade level for STAR reading and math. So it is also an after action review to see how your teaching matches up with your students' results for their test administration in the STAR reading and the STAR math. Yes. And so another thing that you can do with your STAR results is this planner tool that is embedded in the Renaissance platform. So if you select that pink P tile on your STAR homepage, it will take you, can you select the planning? Yeah. So this is just the STAR help file that will walk you through what to do when you select that planning feature. So it will have you choose which students you want to plan for. And then when you scroll down, you'll also choose like the time frame for when you're planning. So if you're going to use this planner, for example, this week, you might want to plan for the next 2 weeks. So you'll select those 2 weeks in that time frame calendar. And then for which content area, reading or math. And then what it'll do is when you, you'll, can you go up a little bit there? So it says selecting skills. Scroll down. There you go. So when you select skills, it's going to show you some skills that are within the range of your students' scale scores that are tied to the focus skills that are recommended by their latest test administration. And the one caveat that we do have for this planning tool is that it will give you ideas about lessons or student activities that do pertain to the standards for those focus skills, but they're from the internet, so you will have to vet them beforehand to make sure that they are appropriate for your students. Your students can do the task if it's something that you're assigning to them to do individually. So you can go ahead and try that out. It's a starting point. We know you have a ton of other instructional resources to draw from, but it is a starting point. Can you go back to the slides? Thank you. And you can also access the planning function through your record book on that plan instruction hyperlink at the top right corner. And there's also a deck there to learn more. Another way you could use your students' results from the STAR State Standards Mastery Report, and we're just doing this is also the end of the year, and we just created this resource. What we did is we took all of, and this is only for grades K through 5, we took all of the ELA and math content statements within the standards-based reports cards for those grade levels, grades K through 5, and then we highlighted the ones that are included in the State Standards Mastery Report, so that you could use this information to inform your report cards for the end of the year. So in this slide, you can see that the grade 1 ELA content statement of uses grade level phonics and word solving strategies to read unknown words in a text matches up with that standard that is boxed in the green box. So you could use your students' results for that item in the State Standards Mastery Report for STAR reading to grade that ELA statement within the SBRC. Similarly, we have the same content statements for the math part of the SBRC, and those highlighted in green are the ones that are also included in the State Standards Mastery Report for STAR Math. Next slide. So here's just the slide that has the resources that we just showed you in the previous slide. There's links to the standard-based report cards by grade level, and then the sheet that has the ELA and math statements highlighted in green that are also found in the State Standards Mastery Report. And this is what the sheet looks like. So any of the report card statements in green are also in the State Standards Mastery Report that you can use to inform your report cards. Thank you. Next slide.
Well, I get this question a lot about how to use this for scoring. And one way to use this for scoring is in the Standards Mastery Report, that is showing if students have mastered that, grade level content. And if they score secure, they have definitely mastered it. So that would be a score of a 3 on the report card as an example of how to use it to score for the items highlighted in green. And then if they're developing, then they might be in a 2. And then if they're, still working on learning and mastering, then it might be a score of a 1 if they haven't yet mastered that grade level content. So that's just an example of how to use the scoring key and the color-coded Standards Mastery Report for the scoring on the report card.
So if you do have any questions, go ahead and unmute or type them in the chat, or you can always just email us at aao@sfusd.edu if you think of a question that you have later after the session is over. Next slide. We do have a number of resources and support that I'll go ahead and show you now. Next slide. This is our last synchronous virtual PD for this school year. You can access all of our previously recorded STAR PDs on our STAR PD page, which is linked on this slide. For future STAR PD for the 2024-2025 school year, we will list them in our bit.ly for STAR PD registration for next year. Next slide. Here is a one-stop shop for all STAR assessment resources. We have the different web pages for the STAR on topics of how to administer, how to access reports, the analysis tools that we reviewed, and the STAR PD page that you will find this and the previous recordings of virtual sessions posted. If you do have a question, like I said, you could email us, or you can also call the office at normal business hours at 415-241-6400, and we are happy to help you. We do pride ourselves on trying to reach out and respond within 1 business day. So we welcome all of your questions and any wonderings. In addition, we do have our Tuesday office hours. That is from 3 to 4 p.m. every Tuesday in that Zoom link. And many questions regarding the STAR are also listed and answered in our STAR FAQ. Next slide. Since this is our first year administering the STAR as a school district, we've had many questions regarding the STAR assessment design, the different metrics and result scores that you get, such as the scaled score and the percentile rank. So if you're interested in learning more on the background of the STAR tests and the different metrics included in the reports and what you can glean from the information, you can join our STAR Microlearning Google Classroom here. Just click the link and enter the join code, and we have lots of bite-sized videos, usually no more than 5 minutes long. There are a few longer ones in there, but most are about 5 minutes, and some very short slide decks to explain the inner workings of the STAR computer adaptive tests. Next slide. Michelle and I are really, really, really appreciative of you being here today, and we also appreciate your feedback. So if you do have some time and like to share your feedback, go ahead and select this link or scan the QR code. We do use your feedback to update our resource offerings and to improve our future professional developments. And with that, thank you so much for being here and taking your time this afternoon with us.